All right, we've talked a little bit about what the bureaucracy is. It's all of these agencies that work in the executive branch to kind of help the president. We're now going to focus on the individual pieces that make up the bureaucracy. So the first thing we're going to look at is the one that you're probably most familiar with, which are president's cabinet level departments. There are 15 of these. 14 of the 15 are led by a secretary. Think of it as a director that's appointed by the president and has to be confirmed or approved by the Senate. So the person that leads the Department of State is the Secretary of State, appointed by the president, approved by the Senate. The person that leads the Department of the Treasury would be the Secretary of the Treasury. That person would be approved by the appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. The only one of the 15 that's not led by a secretary is the Department of Justice, who is led by the Attorney General. Same thing, appointed by the president, approved by the Senate. Each one of these departments is led by a secretary or an attorney general, but it's thousands of people working within it, and they have pretty immensely broad responsibilities. Like the Department of Energy deals with all things energy. Department of Labor deals with all things like employment and labor related things. These are massive, massive departments. At one point in time, no longer, these were where a president put his most trusted advisors. That's kind of changed. Again, appointed by the president, confirmation, approval needed by the Senate. You'd see some of President Biden's cabinet members. Again, each one of these people leads one of these departments. They were appointed by President Biden and basically confirmed by the Senate. The unique thing about the cabinet level departments is that they show up in the chain of command, the line of presidential succession. So we've already talked about the fact that if something happens to the president, the vice president takes over. If something happens to the president and the vice president, the Speaker of the House takes over. If something happens to the president, vice president, Speaker of the House, and the temporary president of the Senate, the president pro temp, then the Secretary of State takes over. So you'll notice the Secretary of State through Homeland Security, they're not in order of importance, they're in the order of their creation. The first four cabinet level departments were State, Treasury, Defense, and Attorney General. Everything else was created after the fact because something required a new cabinet level position. So again, the cabinet is in the line of presidential succession. Today, a president's closest and trusted advisors are in the EOP, which is the Executive Office of the President. So these are people that have offices usually within the White House. You can see some of the different departments. Again, each one of these will be led by somebody. And what makes a president much more likely today to use these people as his most trusted advisors compared to old school presidents who use the cabinet is that these people in the executive office of the president don't require any kind of congressional approval. The Senate doesn't need to confirm these people. So you don't have to put them through the really difficult process of going through the approval process, right? So today, a president's most trusted advisors are in the EOP or the executive office of the president. Two people for President Biden that have been in the executive office of the president are his chief of staff, Ron Klain, and his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who is the first openly LGBTQ press secretary, the person that gives the daily briefing every single day in American history. So these people were just given their jobs by President Obama. They didn't have to go through the Senate confirmation process. Both of them are examples of people in the EOP. Another group of people within the bureaucracy are the independent executive agencies. There are approximately 137 of these. Like cabinet departments, they're led by a single person that is appointed by the president, but they have much more narrower responsibilities. They're not as broad as the cabinet level departments. For example, like the FBI deals with criminal justice. That's an example of an independent executive agency. The CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, deals with collecting information about foreign countries. NASA is our space agency. They're much more specific and narrowly focused than the cabinet level departments. We also have what are called independent regulatory commissions. There's about 100 of these things that exist. These are a little bit different because they're usually led by about 5 to 7 people as opposed to one person. And they're also appointed by the president. Usually, they regulate some sort of aspect of the economy. So, for example, the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC for short, helps to regulate the stock market, part of the economy. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, right, is a group that basically deals with helping consumers remain safe. So, for example, if there's some sort of problem with a product, and there has to be a recall on that product for some reason, the Consumer Product Safety Commission is usually the group that investigated that product, and they're the ones that basically called for the recall. And then there are approximately 17 government corporations that exist as well. These are a little bit confusing because they provide some sort of service to the American public that's considered to be like essential. It's important for the American public to have access to whatever service these groups provide. And at one point in time, this used to be done by some kind of private company. But then that stopped being profitable for that company to operate. So the company just closed. But the government couldn't allow whatever service they were providing just to go away. So the government basically takes it over. So, for example, the US Postal Service today, like your mail people, like that's run by the United States government. It's a great example of a government corporation. At one point in time in our country's history, all mail delivery was done by private companies, and then it stopped being profitable. But we can't just not have mail service. So the government takes on that responsibility. Basically, train travel across the country, not like SEPTA, but like, Amtrak, train like transportation used to be done by all private companies, but then that ceased to be profitable. But we can't just not have like trains that go across the country. So the United States government stepped in and they took over like the multi-state train service. That's Amtrak. Most people don't know that Amtrak's actually run by the United States government. That's a government corporation. So all of these are sort of like parts of the bureaucracy, whether it's cabinet or executive office of the president or any of the other agencies. We're talking about millions and millions of people that work for the federal government in one capacity or the other.